So I'm going to talk about this, how we thought we had big data, and we built everything planning for big data, and it turns out we don't actually have big data. And while that's nice and fun and seems chill, it's actually a big problem. And I'm asking everybody here to please help, because I don't know what to do. Okay, so by the way, my background, I am one of the founders of a company called Mode. It was a BI tool acquired by ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot was also a BI tool. At ThoughtSpot, I went from being the CTO of Mode to the field CTO at ThoughtSpot. I don't really know what that is, but I was like hanging out in the field, I guess. ThoughtSpot kind of thought I was like meh. And so then I went to being exploring something new, or an angel investor or an advisor or an independent contractor or whatever. I also like yelled at the internet. This is kind of the general vibe of the blog. More recently, I have taken a job for the Harris Walls campaign. If you ever have a chance to go to Wilmington, Delaware, don't. But that is where I live now. I have to make a very important caveat here. Nothing I say has anything to do with any of this. I am not Kamala Harris. She did not endorse this message. We all exist in the context of where we came from. This talk does not. It fell out of a coconut tree. The Venn diagram of me in this talk and Kamala looks like this. Nothing I say here has anything to do with any of this campaign, so please, this is just me talking as the founder and CTO of Mode. Though really, it's me talking as a sales rep of Mode, because what I want to talk about is like BI demos. So I've given a lot of demos of BI products of Mode. This is what Mode looks like. Of ThoughtSpot, this is what ThoughtSpot looks like. And when we give these sort of demos, there are always two things that like I did in these demos. One is you say you have bad Wi-Fi. Like a trick for demos is always be like, Wi-Fi sucks, and then if something goes wrong, oh, it's that bad Wi-Fi. The second thing is they all kind of followed the same script. And so this is actually a real script that I found on an old Google Drive thing of a Mode demo. And I'll walk through some of the like lines from this actual deck. That was how we gave these demos. And so it'd always be a story like this. It'd be like, all right, let's suppose we have some hypothetical company, say it's like similar to LinkedIn or whatever. There are product dashboards for these sorts of stuff. We'd show some product dashboard. And then we'd show this little like blip and like, oh, what's this? This is like a number that looks bad. What's going on? And so you tell a little bit of a story about like, oh, our sales team noticed that something's wrong. We want to look into that. Maybe it's something to do with like uploading pictures or whatever made up feature. You'd write some queries, you do some work, and you say, okay, like I'm pulling a bunch of event data that includes these various actions about users and stuff like that. And then you would show like some more data. And then you'd say, oh, look, we found something interesting. People aren't uploading pictures. Like, here's some sort of insight. This is our least used feature. And you'd kind of keep digging into it. You'd iterate through this more and more, like, we got to dig deeper. You'd show some more, like, dashboards and drill downs and stuff like that. You'd ask, like, does this apply to our biggest customers? You'd build some sort of model to assess it. You'd show the model. And you'd be like, look, here's some interesting stuff that I found. This is a good place to start solving this problem. And then you'd say, like, okay, great. Now let's go build a report and dashboard on top of this thing. And here's your dashboard. And like this is the arc of every BI demo that you ever give, where basically there is a problem. You kind of find this problem. You're like, what's going wrong? Some like intrepid analyst comes along, shout out to Jonah Hill from Moneyball, and like finds the solution to this problem in the data by exploring and like spelunking their way through all of this hard stuff, and they turn things around. It's like that is the arc of all of these demos. And so there was a company that was a Mode competitor called Periscope. They like existed from 2012 to 2020 or so. And they had this bit on their website that always kind of resonated with me that told this story pretty well. So this was like on their About page, and it said, Periscope data was built by a small team of hackers working out of a warehouse in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. And that moment when a blip in the data makes you say, wait a minute. And I think like for a lot of data people, this kind of feels right. Like this is the sort of thing that we're chasing. And so it's like, all right, we have data. There is some sort of blip that gives us a clue of what to look at. We like slice it and we dice it and then we drill into it and then like voila, there's insight. And like, this is very much a story that we all like to tell. And so if you do this enough, if you like give enough of these demos, you will notice two things. And so I've done a bunch of these demos. If you do them when you're like old, then there are two things that come out of this. One is it works. That like this sells. This story actually really works. Mode had a bunch of customers that were sold in exactly this way. Periscope had, according to their website, 1,000 companies that did the same thing that were probably sold in this way. Bigger BI tools, so Power BI, which is much bigger than both Mode and Periscope, says roughly the same thing of like quickly find meaningful insights within your data. Tableau, also a very big BI company, similar story of like discover and share insights that can change your business and the world. It's like this story sells. This is like the key story behind most of the ways that BI tools sell is this kind of, you're gonna find stuff in your data, there's like insight in there, and if only you had the right tool to go drill into it, you'd find all this stuff. The other thing you come to learn though, if you do this a bunch, is it doesn't really work. That like the story works and the story sells, but you end up with a lot of this sort of stuff. So this is like an old meme from, I guess, a few years ago about like trash boards. They're dashboards that nobody uses. Lindsay was just talking about this. There's a bunch of these things out there that are like you build these tools and nobody actually quite uses them this way. That the story sounds nice, people buy the story, but like what actually exists isn't the story. Like that's not the thing that actually happens. And so somebody wrote this like Substack, Brittany Davis, called The Revolving Door of BI. It has a line in it that says, despite the high upfront investment costs, companies continue to swap out their BI tools every 2 to 3 years. I have no idea if this is true, but like it sort of rings true to me. And so I put it up here. But like it feels like the way this works. And it's one of the reasons why there's kind of constantly new BI tools coming up, is because you can always kind of sell someone who had a failed version of that narrative. They had that narrative, they bought it because they were going to find all this stuff, and then it didn't actually work out, and so they'd go looking for a new BI tool because their existing one didn't live up to the sales pitch. And so this story, again, of like the intrepid analyst that finds all of these things kind of only exists in movies, like Spock and Margin Call, like finding this stuff. Like this isn't how it actually happens. This isn't the way that BI tools are typically used. Which is, if you think about it, it's like a little bit weird that we've been trying this forever. We've been trying to do this forever. BI tools have been around for a really long time. They've been selling this story for a really long time. It still doesn't really work. Like, we've been trying to do this for 20, 30 years, and we still don't actually have a thing that sells this story the way we think it does. And also, people still buy it, which is kind of weird, too. And so all this is like, I don't know, that's strange. Why is this happening, and why haven't we figured this out? I think there's kind of an answer to it, to all of these questions, well, the other questions. And it comes actually from Minnesota, not anything to do with Tim Walz, actually. But there's a way to answer this that starts with Target. So Target's based in Minnesota. So if anybody remembers, like this was 12 years ago, back in 2012, there was this very popular article in the New York Times that was this. This is about Target. It's about how Target's data science team like figured out a bunch of stuff, analyzing all of their big data to help them make better decisions. And this was from February 16th, 2012. The story, like the crux of the story was they figured out, like Target figured out that a teenage girl was pregnant before her dad did. They started sending like flyers and stuff to the house to be like, here are various pregnancy products and diapers and those sorts of things. And so the dad got all upset because he was like, why are you sending these things? My daughter, she's 17. And then like 6 months later, sending a letter being like, I'm sorry I got mad. It turns out she was pregnant. How did you know that? And I didn't. And so this sort of story like made this idea really popular that data had this kind of prophetic powers. That like if we had enough data, we could predict the future. And the Target story actually turned out to be like sort of half true, but that didn't really matter. At some point, we developed this idea that this is like what data was capable of. And there were a bunch of things at this time that were basically telling the same story. So Moneyball, which is about like using data to make sort of better sports teams. This movie came out in 2011. The actual sort of practice was a good bit before that, but it became very popular around the same time. Nate Silver sort of peaked at around this time. There was a website called isnatesilverawitch.com for the 2012 election. This was what it looked like in 2012 on November 7th, 2012. Nate Silver, probably a witch because he predicted all the states. Now, is Nate Silver a witch is like a not safe for work site. It's weird. Don't go to it. I don't know what happened there. This is all from like the Internet Archive because the other one's not good. So this was in 2012. In 2013, there were talks like this. This is Chamath, like Facebook exec / SPAC scam artist / podcaster. In 2013, Facebook popularized this story about like, we figured out that if you have 7 friends in 10 days, then Facebook's gonna be super popular, and like they data science their way to growth. There was this article that Lindsay referenced. This is from 2012 about how data scientists are the sexiest jobs of the 21st century. And we had sort of phrases like this of like data is the new oil. Also from 2012. And so all this kind of built this idea, and it's like very clear what the idea here is, which is like, okay, you've got oil, this kind of raw material. If you drill into it, then like you produce value. Data is the same thing. You've got like data and you drill into it and there's insight. And so we all kind of came to believe this like very deeply, that this is just a true thing, that data contains value, that like this is not a controversial statement at all. I think most people here are probably like, yes, absolutely. That's of course what I believe. And you may have like various caveats to it where you're like, oh, but clean data or updated or governed or whatever tool you're trying to sell that makes that thing true. But fundamentally, like a lot of people came to very much believe that data just contains value. There is value in the data that you have, and all it takes is us to like have the right tools to get that insight out of it. And you see this all over the place. So like, I went to a conference about a year ago. For whatever reason, I was like looking at the various slogans of all the companies in the booths. And they all kind of had this same bit to them. And this is like not to say anything about these companies, but like they all have this same exact idea of like, unlock the power of your data, unlock enterprise data for modern analytics, unlock the value of customer data, maximize the value of your data, master data, hearing, helping you make the most of your data, bring data to life, set your data free. Like all this stuff is basically the same message of like, data contains value and we are the thing that helps you get at it. And like we take this as just like a fundamental truth. We take this as like, this is not a thing that we could even possibly question. We might question how we get at it, but like that statement is true. And so the thing I have is like, okay, like, I don't know, maybe not. Like that, I have some questions. Shout out Martin Luther. One of the reasons is, okay, if you go back to those examples, like Target in 2012 made $73 billion. They make like 100, I had no idea they were this big. Facebook in 2012 had 1.06 billion users. The A's, when they were doing all this Moneyball stuff, were able to analyze almost 12 million historical at-bats from like RetroSheet, which is where all the historic data comes from. When Nate Silver was called a witch, he could look at like the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 elections, and there were 650 million votes to analyze. And like, this is big data. These are like a lot of numbers. And when you have data this big, you can make nice charts that look like this. Like when you have this many samples of things, there is a lot of stuff in that. Like you can do predictions like this. This is an example of like how they did some of the Moneyball stuff. This is over 100 years of baseball data. And so you get these nice curves and charts that like seem like they contain a lot of insight. But we're all here at like Small Data SF. We do not have, most of us aren't making $73 billion. We are like Periscope. We have 1,000 customers. 1,000 ain't that big. Facebook had 1 billion users. Mode in some blog post I found said we had 300,000 users. This was in like a marketing blog post, so this is the absolute biggest number we could have possibly said. I don't know what the real number is, but like it definitely wasn't bigger than this. When you have these numbers, like your charts don't look like this. Your charts look like this. What is this? I don't know. Like your charts look like this. This is from some Power BI thing I found. Or this is from an actual Mode board deck. Like, what do you do with this? You don't slice into this. Like, you don't dice into it. You don't drill into it. Like, you squint at it. And you're like, it's up-ish. I don't know. And like, this is like what the problem with BI is the thing we are not doing is like taking a bunch of data and we have all this insight. And what BI will tell you is if only you buy the right tool, then we will go from the left to the right. But the problem is most of us have like data that's like this. It's not that big. And what do you find in that? I don't know, meh, like it's up-ish, I don't know. And so that's a problem. And so like to paraphrase Peter Thiel, who had like the whole flying cars thing, we were promised these previously unimagined insights. This is an actual line from Snowflake's website, previously unimagined insights. And instead we got these kind of directional vibes where you like look at the chart and you're like, it's up-ish, I don't know. So this is a problem. So this is like the legacy a little bit of big data was we were promised all this stuff, and it turns out the raw materials we have just isn't that valuable. So what do we do about that? I don't know. This thing is telling me I have 2 minutes left, which is great because I don't know how to solve this, and I wanted to run out of time before I had to get to the solutions. I'm also like a sales guy who's trying to sell you this, so I don't know. And I'm like more of an angry critic who doesn't really have ideas. That's why we're critics. But I do have like 3, I guess, ish points. One is that I think a lot of BI tools could focus a lot more on this left side of things where we give sort of prescriptions of what to do and not the create your own. The temptation for a lot of BI tools is like help you explore, help you figure out stuff on your own. Like it turns out we're not that good at that part. The thing we need help with is like, what in the world do we do with it? The hard part is not creating this chart. The hard part is interpreting it. And so like BI tools could lean a lot more into helping me interpret stuff. So like interpretation of data is often a lot harder than exploration. And what most tools focus on is exploration. And that's how we end up with charts like that are like, I don't know, what is this? The second thing I would say is founder mode. No. Not that at all. Do things that don't scale. So I have a friend who was once asked to like recently to figure out the general sentiment of articles about a particular topic. It was like, all right, we need to understand the sentiment of how people are like discussing this topic on various news sites to understand whatever. she wrote like a bunch of stuff to do like various fancy AI sentiment analysis-y things and all that kind of stuff. When she did that, she started like build this thing, and then she realized there were 7 articles about that topic. There were a lot more than 7 articles about Taylor Swift in the New York Times. This is a bad example for that. But whatever thing she was looking at, there were 7 articles. And it was like, why am I building a tool to look at 7 articles, go read them? That will take me 20 minutes. This actually is true for a lot of things that like data folks do. That one of the very early things we did at Mode was build a bunch of charts like this. This is an individual customer. This is like how one customer was using Mode every day. And rather than trying to do a bunch of fancy analysis and figuring out these trends and stuff like that, when you have reasonably small data, just like looking at every example isn't often that hard. And you learn a lot more by looking at stuff like this than you do trying to like cram this into some sort of smart model or something that's like a trend where you can't actually make trends off of the size of the data that you have. So like focusing on individual examples actually, like it doesn't sound great, it doesn't sound like science, but in practice it actually works pretty well when you have data of the scale that most of us have. The third thing I would say, and the thing I will close with is, if you're like, I don't want to do any of this, small data sucks, I want to work with big data, great, come work for Kamala Harris. She's spending a whole bunch of money on ads, like $500 million. Like that is very big data. So there is big data out there. Also, if you want to like hire some data people, a whole bunch of us are about to be unemployed in exactly 6 weeks. And they are all like people who work very hard for not SF salaries. So that is the third option is don't do small data SF, do like big data Wilmington, I don't know. So that's where I will end. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.